Hello, welcome to Zigmatech Learning Hub. I'll be your instructor for biology. For this class, we are going to be taking our exercises from the Examguide app. Now, if you don't already have this installed in your device, I would like you to download the app in order to follow along in this class. Now, Examguide is a leading educational app that helps students prepare adequately for various exams. Exams such as the UTME, the post-UTME, WEAC, GCE, IJMB, KCPE, JUPEB, Calbepedia. In the junior sections, we also have the BECE, we have the JSCE, and so much more. Now, you can download the app from www.examguide.com or you visit the Google Play Store to download. Now, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell to update yourselves on new videos that will be coming up. Now, if you're ready for this class, let's get started. Today, we're going to be looking at an exciting topic, which is reproduction. Reproduction. But before we go ahead with this topic on reproduction, we're still looking at some properties and functions of the cell. I still want to remind you that the cell is referred as the basic unit of life, or regarded as the basic unit of life, because the cells can carry out all the activities of life or processes of life. And these processes of life are referred to as the characteristics of living things, which includes movement, respiration, nutrition, irritability or sensitivity, growth, excretion, reproduction, competition, adaptation, and then death. It means that the cells can carry out each and every one of these activities. And so the cells can also reproduce. Now, in this particular topic, at the end of this lesson, you should be able to do some things for us, or you should be able to note some important things. One of them is that by the end of this lesson, you should be able to define and state the purpose of reproduction. Number two, you should be able to mention the types of reproduction. Number three, you should be able to give a brief explanation of the types of reproduction and also give some examples in each case. Number four, you should be able to briefly explain the types of asexual reproduction and also give some examples alongside with it. And then number five, you should be able to outline some differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. Now, if you are set, let's start. Definition of reproduction. Now, what is reproduction? Reproduction can simply be defined as the process by which living organisms give rise to new individuals after their kind or of the same species. New individuals giving rise to, living organisms giving rise to new individuals after their kind or of the same species. Now, we have purpose for reproduction. What is the purpose for reproduction? Now, the major purpose for reproduction is to ensure the continuity of life. To ensure the continuity of life. Now, let's take a look at types of reproduction. Now, basically, we have two types of reproduction in living organisms. Now, these two types of reproduction include, we have what we call asexual or asexual reproduction, and then we have the second, which is called sexual reproduction. Now, in this particular topic, we're going to be looking at each type of reproduction in details. Now, let's start with the first one, which is asexual reproduction. Now, what is asexual reproduction? By definition, asexual reproduction is a type of reproduction in which new individuals are produced from a single parent without the production and union of gametes. Please take note of key definitions or keywords in this definition. I said it is a type of reproduction in which new individuals are produced or formed from a single parent. Please take note, a single parent without the production, again, and union. So in asexual reproduction, there is no production of gametes, there is no production of, or there is no union of these gametes. So there is an absence of production and absence of union of gametes. Now, the offspring produced during asexual reproduction are called clones. So it simply means in asexual reproduction, the resulting offsprings are identical in every respect to their parent organism. Identical in every respect to their parent organism. That is a clone, okay? Now let's take a look at some of the types of asexual reproduction. Types of asexual reproduction. We have for now, we have more than 4 types of asexual reproduction, more than 4. But for now, we're going to be looking at just briefly 5 types of asexual reproduction. We're going to just touch a little on this 5 types of asexual reproduction. The first one we're going to be looking at is binary fission. Binary fission. Number 2 is budding. Number 3 is spore formation. And number 4 is what we call fragmentation. And then number 5 is vegetative reproduction. Vegetative reproduction. These are 5 types of asexual reproduction we are going to be considering. Now let's start with the first one. The first one is called binary fission, not fusion. Binary fission. Now, binary fission is a type of asexual reproduction in which a parent cell divides into 2 equal parts. Now, these 2 equal parts are what we call daughter cells. I repeat, this is a type of asexual reproduction in which a parent cell divides into 2 equal parts, and these 2 equal parts are referred to as daughter cells. Now, binary fission is a type of reproduction. It's mostly carried out by mostly unicellular organisms. Organisms that belong to kingdom Monera and then kingdom Protista. Organisms that belong to these kingdoms undergo binary fission. An example of kingdom Monera that undergoes binary fission is bacteria, which is the schizophyta. And then we also have for protist, we have the protozoa, we also have the euglenophyta, and so on. For protozoa, we have the paramecium, we have amoeba, and so on. In euglenophyta, we have the euglena that undergoes binary fission. So this is what we call binary fission. Now let's take a look at what binary fission is in terms of structures. Now you can see in number 1, in the structure we have there on the screen, number 1 is the parent cell. Number 2, you can see that the DNA duplicates into 2. And number 3 stage, the cytoplasm begins to divide. The cytoplasm begins to divide. And then stage number 4, the cytoplasm has divided into 2 identical cells. And these 2 cells are referred to as daughter cells. Now, why do we call it binary fission? Is because they divide into 2 daughter cells. Now, there are several cases where organisms divide into more than 2 daughter cells. That type of cell division, or that type of division, we call that multiple fission. We call it multiple fission. So multiple fission can also be added as a type of asexual reproduction. Number 2 is what we call budding. Now, budding is a type of asexual reproduction in which the parent organisms forms an outgrowth. There is an outgrowth from the parent organism, and this outgrowth, when it grows, when it falls down into a favorable environment, it grows into a new organism. So we can define budding as a type of asexual reproduction in which parent organisms forms an outgrowth, which is called the bud, which then grows into a new individual. Now, budding can be found in organisms like yeast. You can also see budding in Hydra. Hydra and yeast, they undergo this type of asexual reproduction, which is called budding. Now, if you look at the screen there, you're going to see structure of a Hydra. And we have about 6 stages in this structure showing budding. Now, look at in stage 1, nothing is happening to the Hydra. There is no appearance of a bud. But a look at in stage 2, there is an appearance of an outgrowth, a little outgrowth. In stage 3, the outgrowth starts looking like the parent organism. In stage 4, definitely it looks like it, and it's about to fall off. And then stage 5, if it falls to a suitable suitable environment, it then grows into a independent organism on its own. All right. As you can see in stage 6, it has grown fully to a Hydra, as that of the parent organism. So this is a structure that actually shows the stages that are involved during budding in Hydra. Number 3 is what we call spore formation. Spore formation. Now, what is spore formation? It is a type of asexual reproduction in which an organism produces numerous spores. Numerous spores. Now, these spores, when they are dispersed and fall on suitable substrates, they germinate and grow into new individuals. Now, you can see spore formation mostly in fungi, kingdom fungi. An example of fungi that undergoes spore formation, we have the Rhizopus. Rhizopus. Also, spore formation can also be observed in protozoa like the paramecium. It can also be observed in bacteria. Okay, so spore formation. Let's take a look at a structure that describes spore formation in Rhizopus. You can see that the sporangium holds the spores. Now, once the sporangium becomes ripe, when it ripens, the sporangium will rupture, releasing the spores. Now, if the spores fall on suitable substrates, if it falls on suitable substrates, it then starts germinating or growing into an adult Rhizopus, or a full-grown Rhizopus. So that is another way Rhizopus carries out asexual reproduction, or produces its own young one after its own kind. Okay, now the next one, number 4, is fragmentation. Fragmentation. Now, what is fragmentation? Now, it is a type of asexual reproduction in which an organism breaks into parts or cuts off a part. The organism cuts off a part or breaks into parts. And these parts it breaks into then later develops into new individual. I repeat, these organisms break into parts or cut off from a part, or cut off a part, and that part that is being cut off grows into new individuals. Now, there are examples of organisms you can see that undergoes fragmentation, mostly is Spirogyra. Spirogyra undergoes fragmentation. Also, to an extent, Hydra undergoes fragmentation. Now, you can see on the screen, this is fragmentation in Spirogyra. You see that the Spirogyra has fragmented into 3 different parts. You have 3 parts. A parent cell fragments or breaks off into 3 different parts. And these 3 different parts grows into new individuals. Grows into new individuals. So one parent organism has broken into 3 different organisms, 3 different parts. So we call this fragmentation. And this one is fragmentation in Spirogyra. Next is vegetative reproduction. Vegetative reproduction. Now, what is vegetative reproduction? That's the last type of asexual reproduction we're going to be considering from this class. So, vegetative reproduction. On that name, some books will call it vegetative propagation. So, whether you see it as vegetative reproduction or you see it as vegetative propagation, they are all correct. So, what is vegetative reproduction? It is a type of asexual reproduction in which new individuals are produced from vegetative parts of the plant. New individuals are produced from vegetative parts of the plant. Now, what are the vegetative parts of the plant? We have the stem, we have the roots, we have the leaves. I repeat, we have the stem, we have the roots, we have the leaves. As you can see in the structure there, you see a part of the leaf or a part of the stem containing the leaves was removed from a plant. Now that is a vegetative plant, and it was planted in a potted soil, and later giving it water and sunlight and every other thing, it was observed that that same particular plant grew into its own individual plant. So that is also a way plants give rise to new individuals after their kind. Now, we have several types of vegetative reproduction. We have 2 types, or several types, but they can be grouped into 2 types. We have what we call the natural vegetative reproduction, and then we have the artificial vegetative reproduction. Now, examples of the natural vegetative reproduction, we have the use of fleshy leaves. Okay, there are cases where you can plant fleshy leaves and then they grow into plants. And then there are sometimes you plant modified underground stems. Now, some of these underground stems includes the cassava plant and so on. When you put it in the soil, it grows into a cassava plant. So we're using natural, that one is applying natural vegetative reproduction. Now, examples of some of the things we use in natural vegetative reproduction includes the corm, which includes suckers as it relates to banana or plantain. We also have rhizomes and so on. But in terms of artificial vegetative reproduction, which is of great interest, and you can also see it in agric science, is layering. We have examples like layering. We have examples like grafting. We have examples like cutting. We have examples like marcotting and so on. These are different types of artificial vegetative reproduction. Now, take a look at this. This is grafting. Grafting. I can cut a part of a stem, okay, of one plant and do the same in another, and then take from plant A that I have cut and put it or attach it to plant B. We call that process grafting. So we're removing a stalk, you're removing a scion from a plant, and you are transferring it into the stalk of another plant. That process is called grafting. And later, that particular plant you have grafted will grow into another organism, or will grow and produce fruits for another organism to emerge. Then next one, another example of artificial vegetative reproduction is layering. Layering. You can see also on the screen, we have simple layering, and you see how it is being done, and it will give rise to new individuals. We also have the other one, which is called marcotting. Marcotting. Okay? Marcotting. These are examples of artificial vegetative reproduction as seen in most plants. Next, advantages of vegetative reproduction. What are some of the advantages? Now, we have a lot of advantages and a lot of disadvantages, but for time's sake, we're going to be looking at 3 advantages of vegetative reproduction. Number 1, it is simple and fast compared to reproduction by seed. Now, if you're looking at reproduction by seed, before pollination will take place from one part of the plant to another and all that, it takes a longer time for you to experience sexual reproduction by seeds as it relates to plants. But in terms of vegetative reproduction, it is faster and simple to carry out. Number 2 is that the resulting offsprings are exactly like their parents. Remember, we said they are clones. They are exactly like their parents. So in other words, if that particular plant has a desirable trait, that trait will also be transmitted to their resulting offsprings. And then number 3, it is the only way of multiplying seedless plants. Seedless plants like pineapples, like banana, they are seedless plants. So it is the only way of multiplying seedless plants. And then let's take a look at some of the disadvantages of vegetative reproduction. Now we're going to be looking at just 2. Number 1, it may lead to overcrowding, because since it is simple and fast, if we carry it out excessively, okay, without control, it may lead to overcrowding of plants around. And of course, if overcrowding sets in, it results in competition. And when competition comes into place, some organisms will not survive. Okay, it now becomes survival of the fittest. Number 2, disadvantage of vegetative reproduction is that any defect, remember we said that the resulting offspring looks exactly like that of the parent organism. Now, any defect in the parent organism will also be passed to the offsprings. So these are 2 major disadvantages of vegetative reproduction. Now, let's move to sexual reproduction. Now, if you take note of what we said as in terms of asexual reproduction, you can get differences between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction as we're going to discuss it now. Now, under sexual reproduction, these are things I want you to take note of. Number 1, sexual reproduction is a type of reproduction that involves the production and the union of gametes. In terms of asexual reproduction, we said it does not involve production, it does not involve union of gametes. But in sexual reproduction, there is a production of gametes, and there is also union of gametes. Number 2 important thing to take note under sexual reproduction is that it involves 2 parent organisms. If you go back, we said in asexual reproduction, it involves only 1 parent organism. But in sexual reproduction, it involves 2 parent organisms. And then number 3, the new individual or the resulting offsprings in sexual reproduction, it is not called a clone, it is called a zygote. Now, as a zygote, there are variations, okay? There are variations. There are several characteristics or traits the child will possess that both parents, that will not come from just exactly one parent, okay? Or the traits of the child might not look exactly like the parent organism, no. Okay, but in terms of asexual reproduction, we said the resulting offspring looks exactly like the parent, and they are called clones. They are called clones. But in sexual reproduction, we call them zygotes. Now, types of sexual reproduction. Basically, we have 2 types of sexual reproduction. Number 1 is called fertilization. In subsequent classes, you're going to discuss more on fertilization. Number 2 type of sexual reproduction is called conjugation. Conjugation. So we have 2 of them, fertilization, conjugation. Now let's look at what happens during fertilization. Now, during fertilization, gametes are produced and gametes are united. Gametes are produced, gametes are united to form a zygote. Now, this zygote undergoes development and changes into an embryo, and from an embryo, it develops into a fetus. And from a fetus, it is then delivered as a young individual. All right. Now, number 2, it is carried out by both higher plants and higher animals. Please take note. Fertilization is also carried out by plants. Some persons feel that plants don't undergo sexual reproduction. In future classes, you're going to understand more on sexual reproduction in plants. Please take note. Plants undergo sexual reproduction. Plants also produce gametes, and there is also union of these gametes. Next, we're going to be talking about, look at the structure as it relates to fertilization, okay, as a type of sexual reproduction in man. You can see the egg cell in the middle, and then we have the sperm cells swimming towards the egg cell in order to fertilize it. Now, this is an example of fertilization in man. Next is conjugation. Conjugation. Now, conjugation is also a type of sexual reproduction in which nuclear materials, that is the content of the nucleus, is passed from one cell to another. Nuclear materials is passed from one cell to another. Examples of organisms that carry out conjugation includes the Spirogyra, we have paramecium, we have mucor, we have Rhizopus, and so many others. These are examples of organisms that carry out conjugation. Now, take a look at conjugation in Spirogyra. Now, how is it carried out? We're going to be looking at it in 4 different stages. 4 different stages. Now, what happens in the first stage is that 2 Spirogyra cells, which are called conjugates, come and lie side by side each other. They lie side by side each other. Now, when they lie side by side each other, the second stage is that a conjugation tube, there is an outgrowth from each of the Spirogyra cells, or from each of the conjugates, a protrusion or outgrowth. Now, this outgrowth meets to form what we call the conjugation tube. To form the conjugation tube. Now, once the conjugation tube is formed, the a nucleus of each of the parent cells, the parent or the conjugates, shrink to form a gamete, to form things that are referred to as a gamete. Now, the one that is referred to as the male empties its own gametes or content or nucleic materials into the other that is referred to as the female, as you can see on the screen in stage 3 and stage 4. So once it empties, the one that empties it or that passes its own nuclear materials is referred to as, please take note, is referred to as the male. The one that receives the nuclear materials from the other conjugate is referred to as the female. Now, once fusion takes place between these nuclear materials, a new individual is produced, which is called a zygospore. Now, once this zygospore, the environment becomes favorable for it to develop, it develops into a new individual. It then develops into a new spirogyral cell. So that is how conjugation takes place in Spirogyra. All right, let's take a look at differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. Lastly, differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. We're actually going to be looking at 4 differences. 4 differences. Number 1, in sexual reproduction, gametes are formed. gametes are formed. But in asexual reproduction, no gametes is formed. No gamete is formed. Number 2 is that in sexual reproduction, there is a fusion or union of gametes. But in asexual reproduction, there is no union or fusion of gametes. And then number 3 is that in sexual reproduction, a zygote is formed. Zygotes are formed, but in asexual reproduction, zygotes are not formed. What are formed, or the resulting offspring in terms of asexual reproduction, is a clone. And then finally, number 4, sexual reproduction involves 2 parent organisms. It involves 2 parent organisms, but in asexual reproduction, it involves only 1 parent organism. 1 parent organism. I hope you really enjoyed this particular class. Now let's take a look at some evaluations to see if we have actually understood this. We have question number 1. Which of the following type of reproduction does a spirogyral cell undergo? Which of these is the type of reproduction does a spirogyral cell undergo? A, spore formation. B, binary fission. C, conjugation. And D, fertilization. And the correct option is conjugation. We have just looked at it, that spirogyral cells undergo fragmentation as well as conjugation, both sexual and asexual reproduction. Number 2, the offspring of an asexual reproduction is called what? A, is it called a zygote? B, is it called a fetus? C, is it called an embryo? And D, is it called a clone? The correct option to this is a clone. While in sexual reproduction, the resulting offspring is called a zygote, while the zygote develops into an embryo, and from an embryo it develops into a fetus. Next, number 4, a type of reproduction in which nuclear materials is passed from one cell to another, that is referred to as conjugation. Conjugation. Now let's take a look at some questions from our Examguide app and see at least 1 or 2 questions and see what we can get out of this. Now take a look at this question. Look at question 3. Which of the following methods of reproduction is common to paramecium and amoeba? Common to paramecium and amoeba. The correct option there is binary fission. Amoeba doesn't undergo budding, and amoeba does not undergo sexual reproduction, which also includes conjugation. So the correct answer is binary fission. Now let's take a look at other questions. Okay, let's look at this. Question 4. Which of the following is true of cloning? Remember, we talked about cloning as the resulting offspring of asexual reproduction. A, it is welcomed as an ethical and moral sound science. B, it involves the asexual multiplication of the tissues of the original organism. C, the clone is similar to but not exactly like the original organism. And then D, only one cell of the original organism is needed to initiate the process. The correct answer is D. Only one cell organism is required to initiate the process of what? Cloning. Why? Cloning is a resulting offspring of asexual reproduction. And remember, when we were looking at the differences between sexual and asexual reproduction, we said in sexual reproduction it involves 2 operant organisms, but in asexual reproduction it involves 1 parent organism. Thank you for participating in today's class. You can practice more questions using your Examguide app. The app scores and gives a detailed explanation of all the questions at the end of your practice test. You can also learn particular topics of interest with different modes like study mode, mock mode, and even practice mode. It also has other features that makes learning very fun. Now, it is a must for all serious students. Download from www.examguide.com if you don't have it yet. See you in the next class. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels, hit the notification bell, and share the videos to your loved ones and friends that will benefit from it. Bye for now.